Hello, bucket list family. Sarah McDaniel here, Canada's recognition expert. If you attended the session live, I wanted to do a re-recording because the slides were a little bit blurry. And for those of you who missed our session, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. We decided to kick off a beautiful 2-day conference with talking about how we can move from strangers to stories through sharing meaningful moments, because recognition is really, it's the glue that keeps us all together. It's what builds unrivaled cultural resilience. And it also gives us, when we feel such uncertainty about how we can make our workplaces better, those of us in human resources and organizational development, learning and development, business owners, leaders, and all of those of you in the Bucket List Rewards family here at this event, it gives us a sense of agency that we can do something to help people at a time when they feel pretty darn stressed. In fact, it's a way of shifting the discourse from all of the angst that we feel in the world, right? Will people have jobs because of AI and economic downturns and tariff and politics and all of the things that are very legitimately on people's minds, and yet are not, if we only have that as part of our discourse, we only ever focus on firefighting, on the stress of change, on struggle. So what would happen if, in fact, we were able to build a sense of community through positive conversations at this time? In other words, never waste a good crisis, right? In times of chaos, when the greatest opportunities exist. You've probably been trying to move the needle on your culture and building a greater sense of recognition and appreciation. Now's the time that we're most likely to be able to do that. Now, our family decided to really test this philosophy. What we did was we were trying to share recognition and test to make sure it's the global language. And we literally did it in a country where we didn't speak the language. This summer, we went to the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. Initially, what we did was we asked Canadian healthcare providers, what is the best compliment you've ever received? And we themed it to 25 different compliments. And we arranged with some of our friends over there, recognition colleagues over there in the Netherlands, to invite us into healthcare organizations so we could bring compliments from one continent to the other. So we spent 3 days doing that, but also we went to markets. We talked to people in hospitality. We noticed, we're curious about all the places and people and spaces, strangers that we had never met and would miss the opportunity to connect with if we didn't bring them a compliment. In fact, we always bring compliments with us. I have this deck of 52 compliments that I always have with me in my purse, in my briefcase, in my travel kit. And so some of those times, and I'll share some of those examples of turning strangers into powerful stories of recognition in our conversation today. The point is, we were curious, could we make things positive, better? Could we build some little micro friendships, positive conversation in a world that is starved for kindness and connection? Now, before you think that this might just be a trite story or not evidence-based, let's all just remember that only 30% of people feel meaningfully, deeply engaged at work. The 70% that's either sort of in the middle there or actively disengaged, we know as people who practice and study the art of recognition, we can cross that disconnection divide through building meaningful connection through recognition. In other words, if we want the 70% that are on the fence or actively disengaged to join those truly engaged people at work, we need to build bridges of connection, and recognition is the easiest way to do that. This is an evidence-based strategy too. When we were writing, my co-author and I were writing our first books on Forever Recognize Others' Greatness. This is our brand, Forever Recognize Others' Greatness. We went and we studied, is there a difference between the least satisfied teams with recognition compared to the most satisfied teams? And we studied a Canadian engagement survey company's huge data set. And what we found is, yeah, there was a very different level of engagement. The orange bars represents what it looks like in low satisfaction with recognition teams. They have 50% or lower intention to stay, satisfaction with leaders, trust the organization, and innovation. When people are very satisfied with recognition, their engagement levels, it's more like in the 75 to over 80% range. They're more likely to stay. They're almost 80% of people, 80% level of engagement, satisfied with leaders. They're more trustful of their organization as a whole. They also engage in innovative behaviors. And not surprisingly, right? If people feel that their voice matters, then they're more likely to contribute to change. So on the heels of always talking about how people are resistant to change, they're afraid of disruption, they're worried their jobs won't exist, isn't it great to know that recognition is the way in which we can keep innovation going? So I actually learned this by working with teams that were imploding. Most of my professional background before I was a full-time recognition expert, as Canada's recognition expert, was working in healthcare. And we would often be called in and asked to support teams that were imploding at the seams. These are people where in their engagement survey, their results might be 30% engaged, if that. These are people where there might be bullying and incivility that had been substantiated. These are sometimes teams that reached out to us and said, people don't even want to come and work here. We have turnover like we've never seen it. So when we show up, we would try a variety of things. In fact, many people who had joined this webinar probably have had similar responsibilities, right? You've probably been the ones trying to help teams in crisis. Well, what we learned through trial and error is that the only thing that was going to be a deal breaker as to if what we did to help those teams would stick was if we made sure recognition was the bedrock of their conversations, their communication, and their connection. In other words, if they could recognize themselves and each other, then they were more likely to stay healthy and resilient because they had a foundation of trust, of psychological safety, and frankly, greater resiliency. And in one of those teams actually was the one who gave us the idea for FROG, Forever Recognize Others' Greatness. They came up with that as an acronym to remember 2 years of hard work that they did to go from a team where nobody would stay, massive turnover, early retirements, gossiping, incivility, to one that was the most satisfied team in the organization with the highest patient safety, quality. They were a center of excellence, and they were really a role model for what great teams look like. Every team meeting, every conversation, every interaction with patients and families were ones where recognition was the bedrock. So how can we bring that forward? Well, that's why we came up with the FROG process. It starts with having an intention to recognize greatness everywhere. Because when we have that intention and we observe it happening, we can acknowledge it. That's the forever part. And when we acknowledge it, it gives us a chance to reflect on what worked and where is it everywhere else. And we can learn about the things that make recognition strong and how we can replicate that, which sparks more intention. It becomes this concentric loop of healthy, strong, vital teams. Said another way, what we focus on grows. And so if we want to do more of something and we want more of this in our environment, then we need to be focusing on recognition, because we could focus on the drama. And that was actually often when we would work with teams, we try to fix the drama, fix the sense of fear that came with lack of safety, psychological safety. But actually, it was focusing on greatness, resiliency, resourcefulness, appreciation. That was what unlocked our success with those teams. And frankly, it was the teams who did the hard work. So it's what unlocked the success with each other. The reality is, though, nearly 30% of people feel invisible at work. They're not feeling appreciated for their greatness. So that might speak for that middle range of how many people are disengaged at work. So here's an example where, we have the opportunity, we have the chance to be able to nurture and fuel that. And we did that in this by bringing appreciation to a community. And this is in the city of Maastricht in the Netherlands, one of the most southern cities in the Netherlands. And we thought, could we give out 200 compliments in an hour? And would that make it different? Would it make it better? Could we create powerful conversations that matter with strangers? Let's see. 1 hour to give out 200 compliments. Can we do this?
Absolutely.
Woo! Let's go.
Zij komen het brengen en we geef het maar door. Precies. Hey.
Compliments from Canada.
Oh,
You're clearly creative and practical. It's a compliment that you epitomize. And you can give it to each other too.
Can I choose?
Yes, give them out to all of your
okay.
friends. You are very positive.
Of course, we have to every day try to make somebody happy, to do something good, and you will deserve it back.
I love that so much. Yes. I think we're able to make a difference because you see, recognition doesn't need a reason. It actually can create a reason. And when we have a reason and we're looking for opportunities to give that recognition and new reasons, that can help us to stay motivated and moving forward. That's what encourages us to observe more of what's working. But what it takes is us to slow down long enough to see the greatness already present. Recognition starts with a choice. Do we choose to see it? Will we acknowledge it? Will it add value to other people's lives? How often do we feel like we are so busy, we are so frantic that we can't actually see that greatness? Only 23% feel meaningfully recognized at work. So we're not slowing down long enough. And I mean, we're doing the best that we can. It's not like we're choosing not to recognize people. But what might happen if we do recognize them? We went to this beautiful little restaurant in Kloodsburg, which is this cute little town in about the middle of the Netherlands. We had a great lunch there. And one of the things we noticed in the menu was all of these stories of the people who work there. Now, the individuals who work in this restaurant are people with different abilities. Many of the pictures in here are individuals with Down syndrome, but it was a variety of people, different neurodivergences, different abilities. And their stories were shared from a place of empowerment and passion and excitement. In fact, when we went to the washroom, we passed this wall of pictures of all of the people that work there. In fact, it was very different than the way in which we're used to seeing walls of staff. Usually when we see walls of staff, it's employee appreciation of the employee of the month. And people's faces on there may look more like mugshots, but these were beautiful photography. It was obviously something that individuals were lovingly posed and positioned so that their true essence of who they are would come across. And that spoke volumes for how much people are valued as individuals and valued as workers. And let's face it, in our world, we don't always value people of different abilities. We don't always revere them. So my husband and I got really curious. We decided we wanted to go and find out who was the leader of this group. Why was this such an important anchor to value and honor people, even in the visual representation of them? And we met Dom and Justin. They're the co-owners or brothers. And in essence, when they shared their business, they shared it from a place of such deep pride. They loved working with people with different abilities to find out what is your favorite food and how can we create different combinations for a menu. They love seeing the customer reaction and this amazing customer service that would happen. They love people surpassing their limits and envisioning new opportunities to try on different roles in their organization. I heard so many compliments, I begun to pick them out. And I said, it sounds like, for example, what you're saying, that for many of the people, you admire how they handle their daily stresses and challenges. And they'd say, yes, that reminds me of and they would mention the name of a staff. So I would say, here's the compliment. You want to give it to them? So we had these beautiful examples of witnessing, bearing witness to them sharing compliments with each other. See, what we learned from Dom and Justin by witnessing this exchange is that recognition is noticing the ordinary moments with extraordinary attention. What would happen if we gave extraordinary attention to those beautiful moments that exist? And we took those opportunities to acknowledge what's working. Could it help with the fact that with the fact that 40% of people experience stress daily? What does that say for our employee experience? You know, I met somebody working in a long-term care home. His name was Peter. You know, he reminded me that recognition has the power to heal and help, and that even if you don't know how much it's needed, it can still be healing and helping. You see, when I asked Peter what compliment was true of him, he had actually asked a question, could I take a compliment for me? And I said, absolutely, yes, please. It's not just for your colleagues, it's for you as well. And he took a compliment about how he's caring and compassionate. And I said, oh my gosh, how lucky your colleagues and your family and your friends are to have somebody who's so caring and compassionate. And he got tears that sprung to his eyes, and he was a little uncomfortable receiving the compliment, but also there was something about the fact that he was a bit hung up on, he was not in the frontline caring capacity. He was working in maintenance. And it's almost like he felt that that wasn't his job in the long-term care home, to be the caring, compassionate one. Having an inclination of this, working in healthcare, I said, how lucky it is that your frontline providers know that they have you there to support the art of care and compassion in a facility that it needs to exist in every role. The next morning, we're in a hospital, and a member of the human resources team came up to me, and she said, you met my brother yesterday, Peter. And she said it in a very serious way. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I in trouble? And she said, you know, he made us all hop on a FaceTime yesterday. I was busy trying to get my kids off to their activities that evening, but he insisted we all had to get on video. And he said we all needed to start a compliment exchange with each other. We were on the phone for half an hour, acknowledging each other's value and worth and strengths and attributes as a family. I said, did it make a difference? She said, it was the best family meeting I can ever remember. Thanks to Peter, because Peter is caring and compassionate. That afternoon, the only location we went back to twice was that long-term care home. And who do we meet first? Peter. We said to Peter, Peter, your sister is so proud of you. She's so in awe of your caring and compassionate nature. And he said, again, tears sprung to his eyes. He said, really? She said that about me? Now, we don't know Peter's history. We don't know his relationship with his sister. We don't know about their family of origin. But to have that kind of a reaction, it's probably not that recognition was in ample supply between these siblings, or maybe in their family. Or maybe it's just that something that he couldn't help but be caring and compassionate wasn't something that was really seen as an attribute in his family, but it is now. Every unspoken compliment is a story untold. We have to share it regularly. Peter and his sister, they shared it in their family. Hopefully that's the beginning of many beautiful family conversations of care. Because really, those moments allows us to reflect on the greatness that exists, reflect on how we can share it more. Because recognition reminds people why they matter to you, why they matter in the team, why they matter in the industry, why they matter in the world. It's a way of honoring the person as not just their performance. Because let's face it, In organizations, sometimes recognition gets synonymously shared with top performers, and it's usually performance in terms of metrics, KPIs, targets. And that is true by all means. We're in the business of either making money or doing things within the budget. If it's in a not-for-profit, having to use the budget allotment that you have. However, it's people that makes our organization successful. We all know that. So how do we honor the person who is behind the performance? When we do this well, when we recognize people on a weekly basis, they're 2.6 times more likely to be productive, 9 times more likely to recognize their company, 6 times more likely to see a long-term care there. So although recognition can seem like soft, fluffy stuff, actually what it is our retention superpower, and it is our business performance superpower as well. Meet Lisa. We donate blood, my husband and I, and plasma regularly. Unfortunately, I have a number of friends going through cancer. I have a friend who was on the transplant list, who's in kidney failure. So it's our way of trying to add giving plasma every week, add to their chance of success. So you build a relationship with people. When you're there every week, you build a relationship pretty quick with these healthcare providers. This is Lisa. Lisa can find a vein better than anyone that I have ever experienced. Thank goodness, right? I asked Lisa, what's the best compliment you've ever received? One that you feel is so meaningful you would like us to bring to providers on the other side of the ocean. She said, it's easy. Please be as kind to yourself as you are for the people that you provide care to. We gave that compliment, as well as the other 24 that people had when we themed all the compliments that different providers wanted us to give to their Dutch counterparts. This is the only compliment that we brought none back of. We brought 50 of every single compliment that we had curated, of that list of 25 different compliments. We printed 50 of each of them. This is the only one that we had no inventory left. Obviously, whether they were hospital professionals, back office services, social workers, so that part of the allied health team, back office services, everyone needs to know you deserve to take care of yourself too. Recognition truly is the universal language. So we need to speak it fluently, not occasionally. Not when it's just something that is the outcome at the end of a project, at the end of the day. We need to speak it fluently throughout our day with everyone. And that allows us to learn from each other, learn what works in our organizations and our cultures, and also to learn what matters to each other. Because the more we're noticing how people recognize each other, that gives us a window to what they most value. So that when we recognize those things, the things that they compliment others about or that they notice and talk about, then they feel a greater sense of contribution to the whole as well. We're constantly learning about each other when we're noticing the conversations, and we're also learning about what works in our teams and our organizations for a strong recognition-rich culture. Why this is so important now is because we're in a frozen job market. When we were in the Great Resignation, we were really stressed because we couldn't always find people to fill the roles. Now, it's an employer's market. However, we can't just sit by and be okay with that. We actually should be concerned about that too, because what the data shows is that when it's a frozen job market, people are hesitant to leave or switch a role. So that means that there's still a problem. Productivity can fall, innovation can decline, our living standards can stagnate, inequality can rise, social mobility craters. So now is still the time we need to recognize to be able to help try to combat some of those things that happens in a frozen job market when there's lower turnover. And let's face it, no one ever left because they were too valued. So maybe it's going to help us the next time we do, things flip again. And it's an employee's job market. Recognition is our retention superpower now and into the future. So if we're not sure how people want to be appreciated, we can be asking now, why do you stay? Why people stay shows us what they value and how to retain them. And one of the best things we can do is build stay interviews into our one-on-one conversations. Maybe it replaces or complements our exit interviewing process. You know, when I delivered this session originally for our Bucket List Family Live, many people talked about how they spend time asking people at the beginning when they're first hired, how do they like to be appreciated? That's like a stay interview right at the beginning of somebody's employment history. So ask people, be curious about why they chose to work for you, why they chose their sector, what they most love about their work, what do they value in their colleagues, what do they value in themselves, and build that into how we can continue to recognize them. You can take a look at this interactive model that we have built, because we would hear time and time again that people were frustrated, that people were negative, disloyal, entitled, unmotivated. And that's what's above the waterline. It's what seems to be on the surface. We can come up with a lot of assumptions about individuals and frame the problems, see the issues, as opposed to looking what might be below the surface, contributing to what it seems to be happening. What often is contributing is to low clarity, low psychological safety, low growth, low empowerment, low trust, low recognition. The more we're curious about what we're not seeing and taking that, one of the deepest things, reason why we don't always know that recognition is low until we measure engagement survey results, is because it's one of those things that's not only pretty invisible when it happens, but also when it's not happening. That what we usually see at the very top of it is people being actively complaining, negative, frustrated. But a complaint's merely a poorly worded request. Maybe low engagement is simply a sign when it shows up as negative, as I need to feel valued. I can't give you more waking hours than anything else. I cannot be seen as doing the best that I can, and that value being honored. See, compliments, it's not just about recognizing effort. It affirms people's identity. Recognition is a way of saying, I see you, who you are, and I value you, not just your output, not just what you did, not just your latest milestone or achievement. I value you. And sometimes that is the only place where somebody may feel deeply valued for who they are. And in a world of opportunities to go different places, work different places, in a long career history that everyone has had, sometimes you valuing that person for who they are, for their identity, that may be the first time, or the first time in a long time where that has happened. And that's why we say frog, forever recognize others' greatness, not just at the end of a team milestone, not just at the end of a project, forever. Because people's best can show up every day if we choose to acknowledge it when we see it. This allows us to really embrace the opportunity to cross the recognition divide. Because when people feel truly fulfilled, they're 4 times more likely to be engaged at work, less than half as likely to be looking for a new job, 44% more likely to be thriving overall. When they're not fulfilled, they're 8 times more likely to be actively disengaged, 4 times more likely to be looking for another work, more their job, and 62% more likely to be struggling in life overall. So we don't have anything to lose. If we want to turn strangers into stories, and even the people who really technically aren't strangers, we should know them because we work with them every day. But how much do we truly know people? The more we acknowledge, the more people will feel comfortable enough to reveal who they are to us in the world. So Consider somebody that needs to cross this divide and that you want to invite them to do that along with you through recognition. Who is somebody today that you can acknowledge so that they know how much they matter to you? That is my invitation to you. Be less of a stranger to people and be curious about those individuals that you know, and maybe even experiment with people that you don't know in your community, with the coaches in your kids' school, your kids' teachers, with people who volunteer in your community, with the clerk at your grocery store, with your own boss. Recognize something. Show them that you're noticing their greatness and see how you will know even more about them. Let's use compliments as a way to build meaningful connection and along the way, be even more satisfied ourselves. My name is Sarah McDaniel. I'm Canada's recognition expert. Thank you so much for attending this bucket list reward session. If I can help in any way, please reach out to me at greatnessmagnified.com. You can visit me, connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And of course, as always, remember to recognize your own greatness.